Okay, welcome to the Sack to Sack podcast, the inaugural spin-off of the Sackcast. This is your host, Isaac, with your co-host, Isaac. Say hello, Isaac.
Hello, Isaac.
All right. And the idea for this came about because I ran into another Isaac who was also a movie dork with a comparable knowledge base to my own. So I figured I'd do these little podcasts in between the main Sackcast to talk about the weirder shit that I'm into and talk about them with someone with a similar knowledge base. So I'm not just yelling at Clancy for not knowing things the entire podcast.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I'd say it's comparable but not congruent. It seems like we both have an extremely broad understanding and appreciation for all kinds of film, but we both have blind spots that the others don't.
Yeah, it's like we're both into cars, but you're really into like Model T Fords, and I'm really into like post-war Studebakers.
Except we're not into cars at all.
Yeah.
And I like Jaguars.
There you go.
No, I don't like Jaguars.
Oh. I once saw a Jaguar that had a bumper sticker on it that said, all the parts falling off of this automobile are of the finest British craftsmanship.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, but anyway, the idea here is that we talk about one movie per week.
Per week? You want to do this weekly?
I don't know. However often we plan on doing it.
Can.
Yeah. We both watch a movie and then we talk about it. And
we alternate who picks the movie.
Exactly. So this week we're talking about Pulgasari, a North Korean monster movie executive produced by the late great leader Kim Jong-il himself from 1985?
Yes, 85.
Yes. And there's an interesting story behind this movie. The director, what's the director's name?
Give me 1 second. Directed by Shin Sang-ok.
Okay, so that guy.
Or I don't know. Can you pronounce that?
Shin Sang-ok sounds about right to me.
Shin Sang-ok.
So this director was a South Korean filmmaker who had a fairly prolific career before this film. And in the late 70s, he and his wife, who was a famous actress from South Korea, were both abducted by the North Korean government and forced to make movies for them because Kim Jong-il decided that he wanted North Korea to be a force in the world cinema stage. So he had to abduct some talent. And this was one of 7 movies that they made for North Korea. I don't think the wife acted in this one.
That's the indication I'm getting.
Yeah.
From the Wikipedia article saying that she starred in all of them, but it says where did it go?
Yeah. So anyway, soon after this movie, the director and his wife were at the Vienna Film Festival, I guess, and they were able to escape to the U.S. Embassy and tear off their North Korean shackles for good. And then he came to the U.S. for a while and directed a few movies over here, including the Three Ninjas Knuckle Up, Part 3 in the Three Ninjas saga. Yeah, because there's Three Ninjas Kick Back, Three Ninjas Knuckle Up, and then there's the fourth one's like High Noon at Magic Mountain, or it's like a theme park.
Was that straight to video?
I believe it was.
Okay.
The first 3 got theatrical releases, though.
Okay, because I remember seeing probably at least the first 2. And when you're like an 8-year-old boy, that's high-quality cinema.
Yeah, it caused a schism on the playground at school because there was the faction that liked Surf Ninjas, and then there was the faction that liked the Three Ninjas. The Surf Ninjas being the one with Rob Schneider and the kid that could see the future in his Sega Game Gear.
Didn't see it.
No.
I know of it. I didn't see it.
Well, I had actually avoided that one in my youth, but in recent times, Clancy forced me to get a hold of it for him, and we watched it.
I keep seeing that pop up on Netflix. Like, you might like this, and I'm like,
it's
I think I might actually.
All right.
Just for the camp factor, because I've been really into camp factor lately, so that might be a good segue into this. I hated but loved this movie.
Yeah.
Pulgasari. Pulgasari, huh?
Well, we'll get into the movie in a second.
Yeah.
But and the noise you hear in the background, we're podcasting live from the Iron Goat Brewery tap room in scenic Spokane, Washington. Mm-hmm. They've been so kind as to let us sit here and drink while we do this.
Well, I essentially work here, so
yeah,
I do the trivia nights here on Thursdays, and Misty and I have been actually filling in the tap room when everyone's out of town. So we are technically employees.
Yeah. Well, so there you go. So I guess on to the movie. The Pulgasari is a man in a suit monster movie in the style of Godzilla. And actually...
Kaiju?
Yeah, I read that they actually got some talent from Japan. A special effects guy from Toho who had worked on many of the Godzilla movies. And the guy in the Pulgasari suit is the same actor who was in the Godzilla suit from 1985 through 1995.
That's correct. Kenpachiro Satsuma.
Yeah. And those are some of my favorite Godzilla movies, actually.
That's kind of my blind spot for Godzilla.
Into the microphone.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of my blind spot for Godzilla. I've got the actual original Godzilla on Blu-ray, and I love comparing the original Japanese versus the American remake from 2 years. Or the remake, in quotes.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting to see that the American director actually made no effort to match the style or tone of the Japanese version. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of funny to see that. And then as far as modern Godzilla goes, I think I've seen like the basics, like Godzilla vs. Mothra.
Yeah.
And then Godzilla 2000 I saw in an empty theater.
Yeah, that's not so great. But the ones I'm talking about, Godzilla 1984 that was released as Godzilla 1985 over here is actually pretty good with some impressive special effects. And Godzilla vs. Biolente is actually a really interesting one.
Biolente.
Yeah, that's the one where Godzilla fights a giant flower that's possessed by a soul of some child's dead mother.
Is this a video game? No, I'm just kidding.
No. But there's a lot of elements of it that I think
so that would translate into...
Many a video game maker decided to appropriate for their RPG games or whatever. So anyway, the Pulgasari itself, the story is about a group of downtrodden peasants in the Middle Ages, it looked like. They had cannons and stuff, but they were all swords and sorcery.
Iron. Lots of iron.
But anyway, a group of downtrodden peasants rebel against their evil overlords with the help of the Pulgasari monster, who is created by an imprisoned blacksmith who fashions a tiny doll out of rice and mud, it looked like, and then it's brought to life by a drop of a fair maiden's blood after she pricks her finger on a needle, and then it wakes up and starts eating iron and growing until it gets the size of Godzilla and attacks the evil oppressors. So I mean, okay, because this is a North Korean production, it necessarily has to be communist propaganda, So I don't know. What are your initial thoughts on the movie?
About the propaganda? At first,
I don't know about anything.
About anything? Okay. At first, I was kind of struck at how anti-government and anti-tyranny the film was, because like this, I went into it knowing this is supposed to be propaganda for North Korea. This was stamp of Kim Jong-il saying, "Here's a movie that I wanted to make that's going to somehow, not make the people who see it in North Korea want to overthrow the government."
Yeah.
But it gives that impression. It's like, so if the government is tyrannical, you should endeavor to overthrow them. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until that final, 10 or 15 minutes where you see, oh, okay, now we understand the metaphor. It's like, so you should still try to overthrow the government, but be careful what tools you use to do that because they might turn on you.
Yeah. Well, I saw it a little differently than that. Because the Pulgasari throughout the movie grows and grows and becomes a giant behemoth, and they have to keep feeding it iron to sustain it. and it felt to me like, okay, like basic Marxist outline for communism. You have the stage of revolution, and then you have your stage of dictatorship, where you're kind of beholden to a great leader that puts all the pieces into place, and then after that, there's probably a question mark step in between there, a la the Underpants Gnome. But then after that, it's supposed to be your socialist utopia, right? So I see the Pulgasari as representing that great dictator that has to step aside at the end to or in this case, run out of iron and turn to stone. To bring about the socialist utopia. See the oppressive government in this represents the old guard, like Tsarist Russia or whatever.
Sure.
At least that's what I thought.
Well, I mean, I kind of have to wonder if that context was apparent to the 1985 North Korean film viewer, or if they even got the privilege of seeing the movie.
Yeah. Interesting. The DVD I got a hold of was I think it was a Japanese edition because Japanese was the only other subtitle option. So
it must have been, because what I read is that it was essentially kind of banned. I keep seeing banned across posters of it, like on images I see. But then it got a release in Japan, I think in about 10 years later, 1995, and became like a cult hit.
Yeah.
So that is probably why that is. It's probably huge in Japan.
Well, they like their rubber-suited monster men.
Yeah. Well, who doesn't?
Yeah. So I guess, let's get down to just the nuts and bolts of the movie. I mean, production value-wise, I actually thought they did a pretty decent job as far as, costumes and sets and makeup and everything. It kind of reminded me of an old Shaw Brothers Kung Fu movie. It's really stagey and stuff, but, it's...
It does have some pretty big epic scenes with a lot of people in it.
Well, yeah, that's kind of North Korea's bag.
Is it?
The mass games and stuff, where they get they Kim Jong-il had thousands and thousands of people rehearse and do these huge shows for him. You never heard of the Erang mass games? Oh, well, there's actually a documentary about it called A State of Mind, in which they follow two female North Korean gymnasts who are rehearsing to be a part of this thing. But it takes place in this huge stadium, and I think something like 10 or 20,000 people are involved in the production, and they do all these crazy acrobats and put on shows that tell the story of the rise of North Korea.
Similar to like the Chinese Olympic Games opening ceremonies.
Very similar to the Chinese opening ceremonies in Beijing, yes.
Yeah.
But they do this like every year, and it's one of the few things that tourists that come to North Korea are allowed to see. So
Dennis Rodman's going to be there? Probably.
He's probably seen it, yeah. But anyway, I thought there was definitely a really strong visual style to the movie. Like, the director really liked those big, like, fisheye lenses from kind of a high angle to show kind of big crowd scenes and stuff.
But it still didn't feel as big as it wanted to. I got the feeling. But then I looked up, like, the version you got for me, it was like just a standard full frame.
Yeah.
So it was cut off from its original 1.85. So I'm assuming with that extra little bit, it might have felt a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
Because it felt cheap.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm kind of used to, like I said, watching like Shaw Brothers movies that didn't have any.
But
great
I'm also
budgets,
considering
but
the context of it. It's like I'm sure the director was just, here's what you're going to use.
Yeah.
So use it, and he did an excellent job considering.
Yeah.
I'm sure the resources were very limited for him.
Yeah, like I mean, it doesn't have any of those big, oh shit moments that make some of the best giant monster movies that much novel.
But it tried to imitate them.
Yeah.
I found.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't have Godzilla melting to death in a volcano or anything.
Right. I'm just thinking back to the original Godzilla. There's a scene where you first see Godzilla coming up over a mountain. And
it looks like a hand puppet?
Yeah, coming up. Well, in Pulgasari, what it looked like was they had superimposed two shots. You had the mountain in front and then a shot of Pulgasari coming up. But it felt like to me that was kind of like an homage to the original Godzilla.
Yeah.
Which this whole movie kind of felt like an homage.
Yeah. It actually reminded me, there's a series of giant monster movies called the Daimajin movies. Have you seen these?
Again, this is the whole point of the podcast, isn't it?
Okay. Well, there was a trilogy of movies made in the late 60s, made like back to back to back. I think the first one was in 66 and the last one was in 67. And there were three of them. But they felt really similar to this in that they're about oppressed villagers that have this statue of the Daimajin in the middle of their village. And then when the evil lords will come down and be like, we want taxes and grain. I think it's iron. But then the statue comes to life. It's about it's not as big as most kaiju. It's about 3 or 4 sizes or times the size of a normal man, but it'll go and like avenge the village or whatever. The second one in the series is the best. I think it's called Wrath of Daimajin. But it was directed by Kinji Mizumi, who did some of my favorite like Japanese B films. He did a lot of the Lone Wolf and Cub.
Yeah,
stuff like
that's
that.
one I have seen actually.
Yeah. But this kind of had that feel because you have the giant monster protecting or fighting for the underprivileged.
And like hand in hand, with purpose.
I guess kind of the novel part of this is you get to see him grow from a tiny little thing to a huge thing.
I'm sorry, the first time I saw the live Pulgasari, I laughed.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God, this is a Stuart Little film.
Well, he's cute as fuck, too. I mean, even when he's huge. My favorite parts are actually when they're like, what happened to Pulgasari after he's huge? And they find him and he's just kind of chilling. Like against the wall, reclined against the canyon wall.
Your uncle after Thanksgiving dinner.
Exactly. Yeah.
Pulgasari!
Yeah. But I don't know. I thought they did a good job with the resources they had.
Sure.
I felt like the special effects aren't bad, especially for a kaiju man in suit monster movie.
Yes and no. I mean, I kind of think they pulled it together for what it is. Like in the context of the entire movie, it looks fine. But it felt like it was out of like the 60s. Yeah. Like it would have been right in place with monster movies from the 60s.
Yeah.
And would have fit right in. Would have looked the same. Would have felt the same.
Because
I'd seen similar effects and feeling films from that era. Mm-hmm. But
it definitely feels older than 1985. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
in the context of the entire movie, it fits. It works.
Yeah.
Because it's all kind of absurd. Mm-hmm. Especially like how over the top all of the the emperor and the sergeant and the general. Yeah, doing that typical.
The king was the best. He had that. It looked like he was graduating from high school or something, but it had all those little tassels on it.
And that super long, thin, wispy fake beard.
Yes, but once the Pulgasari actually started smashing buildings, I thought that their model work was pretty impressive.
Yeah, that was the most enjoyable part of the movie for me.
I watched it with Clancy, and he actually made me rewind it the first time Pulgasari just punched through that pagoda and it just exploded. He was like, rewind that. I have to see it again.
Yeah, I did the same thing, especially the part where when Pulgasari got buried, like when they did the whole voodoo thing and took out the soul of the I almost called him a carpenter. Not a carpenter, the
blacksmith.
Yeah, the blacksmith.
Yeah.
And they bury him in rocks in that giant hole.
Yeah.
But then the woman who brought him to life in the first place goes and pretty much slices her wrist over the top of it. And you see, if you freeze frame it, it's like one frame, I think. But you see Pulgasari just cruise out of the rocks, but he's doing this like Dragon Ball Z pose, like one knee up, one arm in the air. Yeah. But because it's in a rubber suit, it doesn't look that accentuated. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wait a minute, go back, pause that. And it's got this sound effect of like you would hear on a cartoon. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's... We should note the soundtrack at this point. Some of it was okay, like the main theme sounded pretty good, and then like the rest of the soundtrack sounded like it came out of a karaoke machine.
Yeah, and it would like cut in and out with scene cuts too.
Yeah. It was like this is the case with a lot of Hong Kong movies from the same period. It seems like all the film scores were made by one guy, stuck alone in his room with a couple racks of Casio keyboards.
When all the audio was in post on this one, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, but I mean that's the film score,
right?
Yeah. And a part of me wonders if the director was putting a little anti-North Korea
subtle
commentary.
Stuff.
Yeah, like
I felt that way too. I was looking for it.
Because I mean, okay, the story is a wrongfully imprisoned blacksmith puts the last of himself into this somewhat artistic work, making the Pulgasari to avenge him. Mm-hmm. It seemed like a little close to home for this fella.
Yeah, I was looking for that kind of stuff. And I really felt like until you get to that end point where it's like, oh no, he can't stop eating iron, he's going to eat all of our resources, we're not going to be able to survive, that it just kept feeling like, you are in the right to try and overthrow a tyrannical government.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't know too much about history of North Korea specifically. I don't know how far back this whole all the bullshit goes.
Well, North Korea is kind of the battered stepchild of the national scene.
Yeah.
In that the entire history of Korea is the history of other people coming in and lording over them, taking their shit over. Like if you look back in their history, Japan will be controlling them for a while, then China will be controlling them for a while, then Russia will be controlling them for a while.
Right.
So,
but after World War II, I guess there was the Korean War.
yeah. Well, the Korean War. Okay, imagine Korea as a couple twins, and one of them was really fucked up by the abuse, and the other one was scarred but okay.
Went to therapy.
Yeah, but the North didn't go to therapy, and because they're in a more inhospitable part of the country, that didn't help either. So once one of the twins became insane, and the other one was slowly, after a few years of therapy, because South Korea was a military dictatorship until the 90s, basically.
Yeah.
So, but they got over it, and now they've been welcomed onto the world stage. But North Korea is just this wingnut weirdo. It reminds me of kind of like when you were in school and there was some homeschool kids that showed up after being homeschooled for their entire lives, so they didn't know how to socialize yet, and everyone was like, they're kind of weird.
But then they're also bullies.
Yeah. And then they end up, shooting up the cafeteria. but when North Korea tries to do that, it just ends up being pathetic. Like they came to the cafeteria with a slingshot and a couple of marbles.
I was going to say a squirt gun.
Yeah, and then the jocks beat the shit out of them. So,
Well, except the jocks aren't beating the shit out of them right now.
No.
They're just kind of being ignored.
Right now, they're kind of at the stage where they're either being ignored or a couple of people are really scared of them just because they don't know what they're going to do next. But
Yeah, it's the dictator who cried nuclear weapon.
So anyway, I guess my final assessment of this movie is that, I've seen a lot of movies that are like, oh, this is a bizarre, interesting story, curio nerd movie that don't really, once you actually see them, they're interesting in that they're kind of a curiosity, but they aren't that great as movies.
No.
This one's a decent movie. I wasn't really bored, And
I wouldn't say
there's enough novelty to the bizarreness of the plot
and part of the bizarreness for me was, I don't know, like I've seen monster movies, and in this movie specifically, more than any other, people were just okay with the monster right off the bat.
Yeah,
just like, oh, here's a valuable asset for our cause.
It's true.
He's huge and grotesque, but
there was that little inkling at the beginning where
for half a scene.
Well, yeah, where they made mention of a Pulgasari like it was some mythical thing that everyone believed in.
Right, which I guess in North Korea, in Korean mythology, there is a Pulgasari. It's based on an actual legendary mythical creature.
Yeah, it seemed like kind of the Korean version of a Jewish golem.
Yeah,
yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, and I don't know. As far as the proficiency of the director, I think as a story, wasn't well written.
Yeah,
I guess it kind of followed a 3-act structure, but I found myself thinking that it should be going somewhere else at this point. Maybe the editing was just weird for me, because I kept noticing it would edit to new scenes and wouldn't give you any kind of context, and then just kind of appeal back to earlier scenes.
Yeah.
Without really tying them together, just assuming that you're making the connections yourself. Mm-hmm. Which, when it's done effectively, that can work. But it felt like there was maybe another 2 hours to this film that was on the cutting room floor.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. And also, you gotta imagine the circumstances under which it was made. You know,
sure.
There's certain movies that I'll describe to people like this movie is like if Ingmar Bergman was forced to direct an exploitation movie with a gun to his head. And this is like a case in which something like that is actually happening.
Exactly.
So
that's why it's so interesting to me, because it's like, what would you direct if you had a gun to your head?
Yeah, and I'm just a fucking nerd for anything that has to do with North Korea. I just find them endlessly fascinating.
Yeah,
just one of the few instances in which an entire country is gone insane in unison, kind of, or at least pretend to be.
Well, it's not unprecedented.
Yeah, it isn't. But in the modern age, they're the only game in town, basically. So.
Yeah. Well. And the fact that they're unique because there really isn't a religion involved.
Yeah. Well, just their religion's the state.
Exactly.
That's what happens. They weren't able to get over that the dictator step of the communist puzzle, which, you know, to be fair, no one ever actually has. I mean, Scandinavia kind of sidestepped it.
Yeah.
But they're able to get away with that because they're, you know, so few of them.
And they're all too pretty to care.
Yeah, it's a tendency. There's high suicide rates, though.
Well, it's dark.
Yeah, that's true.
A lot.
The culture that gave us black metal and Edvard Munch.
Which doesn't surprise me at all.
No. So anyway, I guess we're coming up on time here. So any closing thoughts on the Pulgasari?
No, I don't think so. There was one thing I did notice. The main female character, I forget her name, but the daughter, I guess, of
the one
the
that
blacksmith.
bled on the Pulgasari.
Yeah, the one with the blood. I noticed that essentially any scene where it cuts to her and it's just on her and she's doing whatever she's doing, like when she was preparing the cooking or helping out a wounded soldier, she always seemed to have this contentment about her, like she was smiling. And then she would get, inevitably, bad news.
Yeah.
And then just her face would sour. And I thought that was really interesting. 'Cause like maybe that was a subtle way to kind of express that communist idea of you should be happy serving the whole.
Yeah, it's true. And also, another thing, if you go back to the movies of like Eisenstein, you know, like Battleship Potemkin, you know, that the idea of a mass protagonist. Like in this movie, there's no one's really singled out as a main character. You know, in keeping with, I mean, and if they're featured, a featured character, they aren't given enough of the spotlight to really count as a main protagonist.
I was going to say there's a couple of featured characters.
Yeah, but so I mean, they kind of keep with the communist ideal of everyone working together.
So, the female character,
one's better than anyone else, kind of a thing.
And all the dialogue matches that too. And so those two featured characters, like the main male character, the warrior guy who wants to go to the hills and help the rebels.
Yeah.
It seems like all his motivation is helping the cause.
Mm-hmm.
So that might play into it too.
Yeah.
Overall, I enjoyed it. But I don't think if it had the legacy behind it, like the whole story of the director being kidnapped and being forced to make the film, if that wasn't there, I don't think this would have stuck around.
Yeah. That's true.
You know what I mean?
But, you know.
But then again, it wouldn't have been the same movie.
It's true.
Like, this movie could have been
that's
made
part of
under
the
different
joy of it,
circumstances,
because that's always going on in the back of your mind while you're watching it, you know?
Exactly.
So yeah, that's Pulgasari, and apparently it's on. You can watch it online for free.
Yeah, I just Googled Pulgasari, and I found it on. Let's see what's the website. Filmschoolrejects.com. The link is huge. So I'm not going to do that. So if you just go to filmschoolrejects.com and put in the search Pulgasari.
Yeah, and apparently they put it up to commemorate the passing of great leader Kim Jong-il.
But I'm seeing now that the link for the video they have here is from YouTube, so I bet it's just the whole thing's on YouTube.
Okay, just look it up on YouTube then. I don't think anyone from North Korea is going to come after you about rights issues. So, yeah. So, any idea what we're watching next week?
I've had a couple ideas. I don't know if you want to talk about that on mic.
Oh, okay. Well,
but we can.
I'll post it online once we figure it out. So, I guess that's been Sack to Sack, episode 1. From the Iron Goat Brewery in scenic Spokane, Washington.
Heck yeah.
All right, so say goodnight, Isaac.
Good night, Isaac.
All right, see you later.
That works, though, because we're both named Isaac.
All right, bye.